welcome to the Minority Korner roundtable discussion on race, a big, heavy title for a lot of conversations that we're going to have. My name is James Arthur M. I am the host of Minority Korner podcast here on Maximum Fun. And before we get started, I do just want to say a big thank you to all of you, because if you are watching this means that you have become a new or upgrading member during the Maximum Fun drive. And that means so much to us, not only here at Minority Korner, but all the podcasts at Maximum Fun, because you are supporting the work that we are doing here. And this is our bit of gratitude towards you. And, you know, there's so much that's been going on in the world, especially, you know, we've got a pandemic, we have civil unrest and just crazy things happening on the political spectrum. And I wanted to do something different this year for the Maximum Fun Drive. I wanted to bring together some of the people who I thought were just some of the most brilliant minds, specifically Black minds, that have been here at Minority Korner or Maximum Fun, to come together, essentially Avengers Assemble style, to have a conversation on race. So that is what we're going to do here today. We're grateful that you're here, and let's get started. Let's get to know who are the folks who are going to be here. Now, this one, you know her. She's a crafter, a librarian, and co-creator of the Minority Korner podcast. She is a San Francisco Bay Area native, currently trying to tackle the hard job of being a mom. You know her and love her. It is Anneke Fitz-Clark. Welcome. Hey, girl. Hey.
Thanks for having me.
So grateful for you to be here. And next up, they are an entertainment journalist, film critic, and world changer who always comes to slay. Part of the Maximum Fun Fam Bam. They are the co-hosts of the hit podcast Fantai. Tre'vell Anderson, welcome to the roundtable. Hey, hey.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I'm so glad that you're here. This has been like, people have been asking for a Minority Korner mashup for a while, so this is great.
Let's do it. I'm excited.
So glad that you're here. And next up, she's a certified life coach and business strategist who helps heart-centered, mission-led, purpose-driven entrepreneurs build sustainable, profitable businesses with heart, integrity, authenticity, and soul. I love her so much. Her genius lies in her ability to help you turn your passion into profit so you can make the positive impact you were made to make here in the world. I know this for a fact. She has helped me do it. I am talking about Jennifer Covington. Welcome to the Town Hall, Jen. Hello, hello. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Love that you're here. All right. She's been on Minority Korner before. She is currently a writer for the new Saved by the Bell reboot. She has written for Busy Tonight on E!, NPR's Ask Me Another, and BET's Fitty Central. She is also an active member of the critically acclaimed improv group Three-Peat. Shantira Jackson.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me.
So great. Also, sidebar, the new trailer for the Saved by the Bell reboot, chef's kiss.
Yay.
Looks so good.
Thank you. It was very fun. It's a fun show.
We can't wait. And knowing that you're working on it just gets me that much more excited for it. Like, so good.
That. Thank you. I'm glad that I work there, so I'm happy you like that.
Everybody wins. All right, coming up, he's been on the podcast before. He is a respected government and political professional in New York, advancing progressive policies and working to shape the modern Democratic Party. He is one to watch, an up-and-coming Democratic rising star. Kyle Ishmael, welcome.
James Arthur, my guy. Good to be with you. Good to be with everybody.
It's good to see you. It's been a while, man. It's been a while. All right. Last but certainly not least, he is a tech professional, video game enthusiast, entrepreneur, virtual reality evangelist, and a bit obsessive about comic books and sci-fi media. Is a bit of a blurred like myself. Loves animation, both foreign and domestic, and has had the unique opportunity to travel the world for work and pleasure. And really, dare I say, this guy he's the future for VR. He is trailblazing. I am talking about Bruce. I know him as BJ. You might know him as Cymatic Bruce, but welcome.
Yo, what's
happening? Oh, it's a pleasure to be here and contribute to this amazing panel of beautiful people. Hey,
It is. I mean, look at all this just beautiful melanin. I'm glad this is a video because people need to see these beautiful black shining faces. Like it's a better version of the Brady Bunch, right? Good. All right. Well, we're gonna jump into it, and Aneka, I'm gonna kick over to you for this first question here. So,
Give it to me, yes.
you know, since the murder of George Floyd, which happened like over 2 months ago, it really sparked a lot of this civil unrest that we're seeing and this resurgence around the conversation around Black Lives Matter. And, you know, it reminded me, you and I started our podcast, Minority Korner, about 5 years ago in a response to what was going on with Michael Brown, who was unarmed, shot and killed by the police. Does this feel like deja vu to you? Like, here we are again?
It's always deja vu. I mean, you can go back and read The Souls of Black Folks by W.E.B. Du Bois, and you will hear the same repeated concept over and over and over again. That's why generational trauma is something that we need to discuss, because not only is it passed through our ancestors, through our relatives, through the collective, it is continued presently. It's the tradition of, it's the systems that I guess I kind of want to bring up that keeps repeating this stuff. I mean, when you have white people in the South who were then employed to keep enslaved people in order, then that becomes the police of the South. Then that turns into police brutality of now. How are we supposed to not keep reliving the same story over and over again? I'm just so darkly glad that we have technology to video this now, to make it more concept. I mean, the whole reason that in the 60s, the civil rights movement got traction was because of the news and the coverage of it and the brutality of it. So that's just, again, repeated, you know?
Yeah.
You can watch the video, and I'm sorry for the motorcycle. Oakland. You can watch the video for Fight the Power in 1989, same thing, you know? It's just over and over and over again. So what we really need to focus on is breaking that. And right now, I'm really interested in the discussion of defunding the police. We need to change something drastically in order to move on.
Totally. Yeah. Shantir, are you surprised that we're still here having this conversation?
Oh, absolutely not. I'm from Tallahassee, Florida. Don't nothing surprise me no more. I always say that like I genuinely believe that Black people are like the only people who don't want to be right anymore. I would love for somebody to prove me wrong. I'm tired of being right. We was right about Trump. We be right about the police. We be right about liberal white folks. I work in, Hollywood, quote unquote. I'm a writer, and like liberal white folks think that they got it together, and you'd be like, actually, I would rather you just be racist because you're not actually being very helpful. So totally. I genuinely, I'm not surprised. I always say that like I'm never surprised, but always disappointed, which sounds kind of bleak, but it's very true. It's that it's like nothing new under the sun, and I think that what is new, especially after George Floyd, because Black folks have been new, right? I think that the phones are truly game changing, because it's not just a big, like, you don't have to witness a murder to realize that things are kind of out of control. Just women calling the police on us, or just the way they'll treat you in a grocery store. A lot of times it's what a lot of times people consider microaggressions, which is just like straight up aggression. We have it on tape now. And I think that the movement is getting bigger, because a lot of folks that consider themselves liberal would only go out into the streets if they like saw somebody like screaming nigga and shooting somebody. But now they're like, I guess we should go out because all that grocery store stuff's bad too. So I genuinely think that is where we're at. Like, I'm not surprised, but I am grateful that everybody's getting on board, because we've been here.
Great, yeah. So speaking of like, the movement you were talking about, Shantir, that the movement seems like it's getting bigger, and there's a sense of gratitude that it is getting bigger. So Jen, I want to come to you for this next one on this idea that it's getting bigger. And Eneke and I were talking about, there is a sense of deja vu. We're not surprised that we're here again, but it's bigger. Is there something different about this? Is there something that is maybe a little bit more hopeful than before when we've been having these conversations?
Yeah, I just, again, this is not new to us.
Right.
But what we've seen is the allies, or hoping to be allies, waking up, as has been mentioned. And what I think the difference is, and it's interesting because I brought this up I think the last time I was on Minority Korner, of the different levels of communication, where there's personal, interpersonal, like personal is myself, interpersonal would be me and you. Then there's organizational, institutional, and systemic, right? And so I think what all of these stories are showing us is it doesn't matter if you, the person, don't have hate in your heart and your best friend is Black, because that's not the issue. The issue is that still, Breonna Taylor's, murderers haven't been talked to, brought to justice, nothing, because the system is working how the system has been made to work. And so I think now people are seeing from the beginning to the end, it doesn't matter the hate in your heart personally, but there are institutions and systems in place to oppress Black people. And like Eneke said, like the police, for example, it was born out of policing Black bodies. That's what it was for. So it's not an opinion. It's not about, well, my cousin's a police and he's a great man. He can be still, because the system is set up how it's set up to run, no matter who the players in it are. It's built off of a white supremacist system. And so I think people are now getting it, because you see example after example, and you see, I think also our white allies are seeing like, oh, even if I march or even if I say something, it doesn't matter in the same way, because the system is still churning out as it's supposed to, as systems do. And so I think that's the awakening that everyone gets, like, hey, if you're not on board with white supremacy, no matter who you are, then you're not down with what's going on. And I think that's the shift, so.
Totally. So Trayvon, I want to come over to you for this next one. So we're talking about there's this sort of shift and awakening that seems to be happening. What do you think are maybe some of the like roadblocks that we've been experiencing or that we continue to experience? Like, why are we still here having these conversations? Why is the movement, I would call this like fourth or fifth wave of civil rights, like we're still, here we are, it's again, what are some of those roadblocks? Why does this keep happening?
I think that, so like one of the things that we haven't mentioned yet, right, is that we're in a pandemic, right? And I think that pandemic has caused a lot of people to sit on their couch and be at home and to be still and have to deal with some of these images, right, that maybe in the past, the busyness of their life allowed them to ignore, right? In this particular moment, when you don't really have, quote unquote, that much to do, and you have to wait there for the 8 minutes and 40 some odd seconds or whatever, that you and see the life, right, drain out of his body, in a way, whereas with, maybe some of the other photos or some of the other videos that have come out, you're able to just scroll by it because everyone else, right, is also busy. And so they're also perhaps, and by everyone else, I'm specifically talking about white folks, right? Because, the Black folks, we know, even if we don't watch it, we know what went down.
Already know.
And so I think the pandemic has just required a lot of people to one, just slow down and to pay attention and to kind of take stock of the ways in which, these obias and isms that we bring up and the white supremacy of it all, see how that all manifests in their own lives and like the ways in which, maybe they are complicit in white supremacy and the ways in which maybe they are also anti-Black. And so what we see in terms of like all of these demonstrations happening is, right, there are a lot of white folks out in the streets in the ways that they weren't out in the streets 5 years ago, right? In the ways that they weren't out in the streets when Trayvon Martin was killed, right? In the ways that they weren't out in the streets when Tamir Rice was killed, right? When Sandra Bland was found dead, etc. And so I think that is the shift and the change that a lot of people seem to be feeling in this particular moment. And I think the idea though, right, is now pushing people beyond just like observing and just beyond, I think, going to a protest because you think it'll look good for your Instagram, right? And it's about figuring out what like an action plan is for folks that have verbalized at least some sort of awakening or some sort of reckoning in this moment, and like moving past kind of the performative ways in which people and institutions and companies, right, are able to tweet out Black Lives Matter, right, but like you're not paying your Black employees, on par with their white counterparts, right? And so it's about thinking, I think, differently and multifacetedly about what white supremacy looks like, what racism looks like, what anti-Blackness and homophobia, transphobia, and all them other obias and isms look like, and how we as individuals can undo that in our everyday lives.
Yeah, totally. And it seems like there needs to be, you mentioned something too, like about, anti-Blackness, that it's not enough just to say I'm not racist, right? Like there's anti-Blackness means you're fighting against something, right? Like there were people who probably were like, oh, I don't like slavery, but doesn't mean that they weren't like still probably like thought Black people were less than, so there's like an action that's called upon them. This kind of reminds me of something that Kyle, you had mentioned, that you are tired of people who are risk adverse, right? So can you elaborate on that? Like, what do you mean by that as we are talking about the movement and going forward, that you're tired of people who are risk adverse? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think this really builds off of, everything that's been said so far, in that, I think that people are, to Trevel's point, like Black people know this stuff, right? Like we've seen it, we get it. Even if we don't watch one particular video, we get it, we know it, we've seen it enough, we've experienced it enough in our lives to kind of know, like, oh, I know what that next escalation is. I know what that's gonna be, what that's gonna look like for that person. And so like we take to the streets as we have, and we continuously have. And I think that part of the reason why we're seeing more and more people join us goes to all the points that have been said, already. The pandemic, how that plays into it. But I also think that like it's also an opportunity, and this gets to your question, like for us to, I don't want to say celebrate, but to like almost kind of pat ourselves on the back a little bit, because I think that, and I don't know if maybe this is a generational thing, not to knock the previous generation at all. Obviously, they did a lot, so we could stand on their shoulders. But I think that we are identifying like more ways in which people can take action in meaningful ways. And obviously, again, there's a lot going on at once. Like people are more compelled to take action. But also, I think we're doing a good job of saying, like, it's not enough to say I myself am not racist, like, and we're creating more language, right? Like having conversations and saying you must be you have to be anti-racist, not just, I myself am not a racist. You must take steps. And so I think, when I talk about people, me being frustrated with people being risk averse, like, again, like there's a lot of well-meaning liberal white people, well-meaning liberal non-Black people who, many times are in positions of power, right? So I'm specifically talking about elected officials. I'm in New York City. We have a mayor who considers himself a liberal, considers himself a progressive, is married to a Black woman, has Black children. Yet we are cursing him to high heavens every single day. Right? Like he is basically allowing the police force, he'll pay lip service in his morning press conferences, but then in the afternoon and the evening, the NYPD is carte blanche, just picking people up and throwing them in vans, in unmarked vans, right? So there's obviously a disconnect there. And I think that we have people who are in positions of power, most often white people, not always, but most often white people, who feel like, well, I'm doing something, right? Like I signed this bill that does this, or I, put some funding over here to do this thing. And I think that, us in the movement are saying like, that's not enough. Like, you can't just simply move dollars around and think that that's going to solve the problem. You can't just simply pass one bill and think that that's going to solve the problem. Like, we really need to tackle this shit head on. And you can't tell me you're an ally and be in a position of power, but then your solutions are weak, right? Like, because you're risk averse, because you're like, well, I don't want to do too much. I don't want to piss off this group or that group. I want to try to maintain, you know, at least some credibility with Black people and with people of color. So I'm going to give them something. But if I give them too much, you know, as if we're asking for a lot, like, you know, just the right to exist. But, you know, there's that, you know, that fear of doing too much, going too far. And I think that we're, you know, people in the movement are fed up with that, right? Like, don't claim to be an ally, but you're not giving us the things that we need in order to simply survive in this society. And so I think that's what, you know, in this moment pisses me off, you know, the most. I mean, you know, Malcolm X talked about it, MLK talked about it, you know, the well-meaning, you know, moderate, essentially, right? Like somebody who you feel is like, oh yeah, they're with me, they get it, but they're not willing to do much. They're willing to do the bare minimum, which is more than, you know, others who actually harbor hate in their hearts. But you can't just not harbor hate. You have to actively, effectively, you know, take steps to pull it back and to dismantle it and to make sure that the systems in place aren't perpetuating it. And that's what I'm not seeing enough of.
Yeah. You reminded me of something that there's that, it's been really just echoing in my brain, the Kimberly Jones quote of, they're lucky that all Black people want is equality and not revenge. And when you look at the history of 400 years of what, and plus of what has happened to us, and then, you know, even after slavery had ended and Reconstruction and the continued systemic oppression of a specific group of people that is so harbored in fear and hate, and so Bruce, coming to you, like, what, why do you think it has been either like, why do you think it's been such a challenge to just get this, you know, equality, or, and two, I guess they're two separate questions, but I think that you'll be able to, I have two questions floating in my head for you, and I want you to try to thread them together. What is it that you are just, at the end of the day, I need X to happen? You know, what does that look like? What is it that you are just needing to have a breath of fresh air? You've also described before of walking around in this world, in this Black skin. It is like being in a, like, racism exists in sort of a cloud. It's an ether, and it's just sort of like always there, right? So yeah, talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah. I'll start with the last part first. I think specifically this come up in like being in Japan, for example. And it took me a while, but I noticed, like, hey, if I get stopped in a traffic stop here, or if I interact with the police in any way, like, there's no threat to my life in Japan or in the Netherlands. Like in Amsterdam, I did not feel that pressure. And it was a pressure I didn't even realize I was feeling until I got out of this country, right? There's like this background radiation of anxiety that's on you, that even if I'm in this apartment or in this house and I'm the legitimate owner, if the police get called here, I might get blasted on just because of the way I look. And I have to immediately start using big words and change my accent to have the best chance of surviving that encounter, right? And that's, so I think that's one thing that's kind of, it's just, it's frustrating, and it wears on you, and it's quite ridiculous. The first part of your question about, like, what needs to happen, or why hasn't this pressure or this injustice resulted in something different? I think part of it is that, you know, we do have a system in which, you know, we've got to a point where money, the people with money, are inexorably tied to political decisions. And that has not been separated enough. In fact, over the past 4 decades or so, it's been, the relationship has got tighter and tighter, in which the interests of politicians have almost nothing in common with the interests and the needs of the people, right? Like, we're at a point in history right now where we have all of this technology, we have all of these resources, there's enough food being made for everyone, there are enough dwellings for everyone to be in. We have all the resources in place to have Star Trek right now, and instead we are living in the Escape from LA, and it's ridiculous, but that's kind of where we are, and it's an extremely frustrating place to be. And I think part of that has to do with what was mentioned. You have a lot of people that value peace more than they value justice. Oh goodness. Big vehicles in the background.
I hope that's a piece of justice truck coming over there.
Watch out! They're delivering some right now. But I mean, I think that's also not limited to white liberals either. I think there's been a split in Black America too, where you have an offshoot of Black folks that were able to, for whatever reasons, circumstantial or internal, have been able to kind of go on this trajectory where, I can get to a point where my family's comfortable, and, I have my children going to college, and we have a little bit of generational wealth. And we have this other offshoot of Black folks that, because of everything happening, they're not offered that opportunity, or maybe they're just not as lucky, or maybe their grandpa wasn't that lucky, and that filters down. And it's been this situation where you've seen other cultures come to this country, other places where they, be it from Chinese immigrants or immigrants from Eastern Europe or whatever, not only have they been able to reach back to their mother country and maintain that connection, that cultural, that sense of strength and pride, but they've also been able to network in such a way where the ones that are, economically climbing are able to reach back and raise up. And that's just something because of the nature and history of what has happened in this country, and how we've just been kind of really systematically, pulled apart. The language, the culture, the relationships, the values, a lot of things have had to be built up from scratch, and we don't have that same sense universally, I think, within Black people specifically. I think that also contributes to it's like, I kind of try to back up and think, like, if this was a sci-fi novel of
always a good place to start.
Exactly, there we go. Like, if this is a sci-fi novel of a race of people on some planet that were, oppressed to the degree that Black people were oppressed, and you would definitely expect by Act 2 that people are rising up, and like there'd be like a whole situation when you'd be cheering for the downtrodden, and you'd be like, of course they all got together and organized themselves, and blah 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 blah. And in real life, it just hasn't played out like that at all. Like, the Black people aren't a monolith. That is a good saying, I guess, but it also doesn't indicate that every Black person is also making a positive contribution to us moving forward. Like, there are a lot of Black people that are very much more comfortable with peace rather than justice. Like, well,
you're talking about Kanye. We all know who you're talking about. Okay.
Damn!
Everybody's mind was like Kanye West, but he's struggling. So mental health is important.
Yeah.
I mean, I've legit just like turned Kanye off, like to the point where my brain doesn't even think about it.
Anybody else? I'm seeing head shakes all over. Everybody.
Oh, absolutely. It's very frustrating, the influence that he has. I mean, like, I don't know if anyone's on the hellscape known as Twitter, but I'll be there, and like,
often.
Yeah,
doing the goddess's work. You do it, and you report back and let us know what's going on over there.
I'll be there, and I'm a masochist. But like, even Chance the Rapper, who has done so much good, tweeted and was like, yo, why can't we support Kanye? And I was like, all you had to do was sit down and eat your food. So it's like, he says that, and then he gets a lot of time, it is predominantly Black women giving him very informed, factual, like information as to why, for Kanye being a wonderful rapper, right? Like, he's never voted, and he's literally said he doesn't like to read. So like, just from jump, those are two things where you're like, I don't know, I don't even want him to be like the head of my kid's preschool, let alone the president, if he don't read and ain't never voted, right? So then Terry Crews, who's been like Hotep Kun 101, teaching classes in it, retweeted Chance and said, "Hey man, I support you." And then Chance, after hours of Black women being like, "Yo, homie, this ain't it." He literally said, "This is the hill I'm willing to die on." Terry Crews said, "Sometimes you got to be on that hill, man." And then Chance goes, "I'm running down the hill. I'm sorry."
Wow.
He literally said that. He goes, "I'm running down the hill now. I'm sorry." And it's like, that is the influence that so many people have. But that is also the misogyny, the misogynoir that we have, where like he would only take back what he literally knew was wrong until another Black man that he did not respect decided to side with him. So it's like, we have that going on. And that's like a microcosm of what's going on with what BJ was talking about in the community, about like all your skin folk and kin folks, you know, we all know that. But the idea that like people keep talking about Black women saving us. First of all, I'm tired. Second of all, when we do throw the life raft, you rather fucking swim back than for us to help you. You know what I mean? So I think that there is a lot of things that we need to unpack in the Black community, because BJ talking about like, oh, some people want peace rather than justice. Absolutely. But some people would rather just not. I always think about like, would want the power of the patriarchy. And I think that a lot of Black people need to unpack that, like, yeah, Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, but like, what type of power are you looking for? Are you looking for like the type of power that got us in the place that we are right now, which is white, male, and misogynistic, homophobic? Is that the power we're looking for? And a lot of Black men are looking for that power. And it's like, no, like, we're not free till Black trans women are free. And like, you know what I mean? Like, as soon as Black trans women are free, we good to go, right? But we have people who won't even listen to like a cis Black woman being like, "I don't think that's right." And they'll be like, "No!" And it's like, oh, damn, we got a long way to go before we free. You know what I mean? Right. So yeah, I think that Kanye, I'm ignoring Kanye, and a lot of people think that, oh, you're ignoring Kanye because you're mad at him. No, I'm ignoring Kanye because he is unhelpful to the movement.
And it's unhealthy for not only us as individuals to pay him attention, it's also unhealthy for him. We're not helping him in doing that. Trayvon, I want to come over to you because I saw when Shantir was talking, their head was going like so much. I was like, okay, thoughts, reactions, comments.
You know, I mean, I think the to her point, right, there are so many people who want to who find some sort of worth and some sort of power and some sort of validity in the systems that exist, right? And they see themselves as not, you know, at the bottom of the ladder. They're somewhere in the middle. And so it makes them believe that they can clamber to the top instead of investing in, you know, the beautiful imagination that Black folks have to create something new, right? And right, and part of it is like not their fault, right? We all were raised and socialized in this particular environment that taught us that like this is the way that things happen. These are the systems that are in play, and that you just have to like, you know, get by and survive in, you know, and we've all been doing that to a particular extent. But what I find interesting about, you know, a lot of the leaders in the movement in particular, and for me, I will follow Black trans women, you know, through the end, through the depths of time, is that there is this like this imagination and this reimagining of what like life can look like beyond the systems that are that we're using right now. What kind of a cooperative economic style of power, of relationship, of responsibility and accountability looks like. And you know, and I will, you know, I have to admit and say, somebody brought up the defund the police conversation earlier, and you know, I am one of those people who, you know, I'm down with the cause, but I don't quite see it yet. You know, I'm like in that gray area where I'm like, yeah, they don't need all that money. you know, but I'm also like, okay, what does the system of accountability look like and responsibility look like, you know? And I'm still, you know, I'm doing the research and reading the things and, you know, figuring all of that out. However, we don't have enough people, right, who are interested in doing that work, right? They want other people to do the work for them, to bring them along to that moment. And what I find interesting about this moment is, as we are, you know, trying to hold white people accountable and, you know, show white people what their roles and responsibilities are in, you know, undoing and dismantling white supremacy and patriarchy and all that other stuff, is, you know, we don't seem to be able as a broader community to also have the same conversation that we need to within Black spaces about the ways in which, you know, cis Black men in particular, but some cis Black women as well, and the gays and everybody else, right, end up being machinations of white supremacy in our own ways, right, and end up being anti-Black and anti-trans and all these other things in our own ways. And so there's just so much work to be done, and I personally don't find that a lot of people are like truly invested in the amount of work that needs to be done. They see this little slither over here and they're like, yes, white people, do that shit. And then when the mirror comes to them, they're like, but I'm cool. I don't hate gay people for real. I don't want my son to be gay, but I don't hate gay people. You know, I don't hate trans women. I'm not gonna, you know, if I fall in love with a trans woman, she better tell me, because if she don't tell me, then it's an issue. But I don't hate trans women, you know. And so it's just like we so many people aren't interested, I think, in having those conversations at the same time as we have these other conversations. And I think that type of multifaceted, kind of multi-thronged approach to the work is like where I'm interested in seeing more people go.
Totally, yeah. Aneka, yeah, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I don't want to interrupt Jennifer though. Jen, did you want to?
Jen, then Aneka.
Okay. Well, there's so much great things that you just brought up, but the idea that we're all taught the same thing, like the same playbook, you know, the system. Again, we're all taught, this is what's beautiful, this is what's right, this is the path you're supposed to take. And being a young activist in my 20s, you know, back when I was just so idealistic, but that would be the dream of like, yeah, let's all be free and let's all be equal. And then it's like, but then what? Because my biggest fear was always creating the same system that doesn't work, right? I never hear people talk about this, but Animal Farm had such an impression on me, because that's what they did, right? They took over the farm, but then it got crazy and they just churned out the same thing, and it was like, oh God, that was not good. So, but I love, Treva, what you said was, we have to use our imagination. So even when you said, I don't know what that would look like, but then that's, you know, where we get to imagine. And so I love that. And we are so creative. We are so resilient. I'm like fighting back tears just listening to us talk, or even approach these hard issues, but then we can do it with levity, because it's like, God, we are so resilient. And so, you know what I mean? We come from the strongest survivors. We come from people who were not supposed to make it. We're not supposed to thrive. And here we are with just glowing skin and bright smiles. You know what I mean? In the pandemic, in civil unrest today. You know what I mean? So that's what we bring. You know what I mean? And then it's true also, with the both of you brought up with, it's just like how we say we can't be free until we're all free. So that is, you know, our trans community, that is, you know, you said a trans woman who is differently abled and over 60, truly, like that's the person. And as Trevel said, if we can't be like in a town hall and having a conversation where because that's what intersectionality is, right? There's so many systems at play. There's a patriarchy, there's white supremacy, there's the obias and you know, phobias, like we said. And so until we can all say, as a community, we have all of these pieces and we need to address them all together, then I think that is one of the one of the first stepping stones, and we have to be willing to do that. But I just love the just leaning back on our creativity, our imagination, our resiliency. Like anything we would do moving forward is way easier than what we've already overcome. So I just know that we can do it, you know, but there has to be those honest conversations, and we have to unlearn. We're all doing a whole bunch of unlearning right now.
Yeah, beautiful. Aneka, what were you going to say?
How am I supposed to follow that up? That's not fair.
I know. I'm like, you got me almost moved to tears.
I know. And I'm
like
gonna
that
be
was
coming
such...
in here like, oh, hokey dokey. What am I mean,
no.
well, basically, and just to kind of before I know you want to keep this being such an excellent moderator. I just want to just congratulate you on that, James. Thank you for that. But
well, I can't spike the football before we hit the touchdown. That's like,
I mean,
you know,
made it, who knows?
I'm not doing a Ron DeSantis like we handled the pandemic. We're still in the
it.
middle of the pandemic, man. God.
No. But that's the thing. And I'm hearing it a lot in what everybody has been saying on the panel, and I have to put my librarian hat on because I can't take it off. But it's the research. You know, it's the research, it's the listening, it's the reading, you know? Each and every one of you have expressed things that have happened in the history that we're learning about. You know, we talk about imagining something different that has never been done before, but the best way to do that is understanding where you come from, what worked, what didn't work, and then synthesizing that into creating something new. You know, they always say, like, whenever to become an expert at something, you have to mimic it, you know? Like you and I, James, we started this podcast mimicking it, and then it turned into something beautiful, you know? Like Picasso, he mimicked, and then he became, you know, misogynist, amazing painter. But
you gotta side eye the heroes, you gotta look at the full facets of humans.
People are prisms. So I think that's the biggest issue that I'm noticing now with movement forward, breaking systems, coming together as Black people, is that we're resting on our laurels and we're digging our heels into what we know. And that's problematic, you know, like it's been said on the panel, if we dig our heels into what we know, we're subscribing to, you know, white supremacy. We're subscribing to the patriarch. We're subscribing to all the phobias out there. And, you know, I remember when I told a family member that I was going to take therapy, and they said, well, you're not crazy. Digging your heels into, you know? So it's all about doing your research and not researching within your own bubble, which is the problem with the internet now. There's so much out there that people are siloing themselves into the comfort of yes men articles, you know? So I just want to encourage everybody to, it's not hard and it's fun. You're just Indiana Jonesing some information. And that's the only way that we're ever going to break it. That's the only way that we're ever going to do this. You know, like defunding the police sounds scary because it's like, whoa, what's going to happen? But if you look into, like, for example, when I worked in the bookmobile for Oakland way back a million years ago, they were going to defund that, to give it the money to the police. And their argument was, well, a lot of the adult literacy programs, they aren't working or whatever. But we're like, look, we go to the little kids. That's preventative adult illiteracy right there, you know? So it's about thinking about things like that and understanding where money can prevent a lot of things that police are unfortunately have on their shoulders that they do not know how to take care of. And I'm not a proponent of it. It's just another bubble out there of things for us to like think about, to grab onto, to dig into, say, ooh, that's interesting. Like I just heard on a podcast that vitamin D may suppress a lot of the symptoms of COVID-19. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to take that as fact. You know, I heard it on Radiolab, which is credible, but I am going to research more of that and take some vitamin D supplements, damn it, you know? So it's about exploring all those different options. So
well, it's kind of like there's been a theme. There's been a lot of conversations of, excuse me, of unlearning different things, right? We're all trapped into all of these different sort of systems. So there's unlearning, and then from that, reimagining, right? Like we don't have to know, I don't know what all the solutions are, but let's at least come to we're in the brainstorming parts of it, right? This is supposed to be the fun part of it, like reimagining it, something to tie into like kind of what BJ was talking about too, if like there is enough resources for everyone to have food and shelter in a basic level. We can Star Trek, y'all, we've made it, right? But then when you look at like there are trillionaires now, but what? Like, and why? I just, if I was a trillionaire, I'd be like, here, I have all this money. What am I going to do with it? I'm just a Scrooge McDucking at this point, right? And that's where you can start getting into solutions of, where we look at like, who are the most vulnerable, right? So making sure that like all trans women of color have house, food, and shelter, basic, right? And then we can build up from there, and it then starts to take off. It is a lot of energy to live in a country or a world where there are people who don't have, right? You are affected by it. Even if you're living in your gilded house, it affects you. You are living the energy of it, the unrest of it. It affects you. I want to turn back to a point of sort of defunding the police. Treval's favorite conversation, who has all the answers. Just kidding. But I kind of want to there is, defund the police and reparations. Anybody have any ideas of like teasing those out a bit more and exploring those? What do those look like? Is reparations necessary? Is it too late, too small? Defund the police, is it an impossible idea? What is that?
I mean, like, okay, so like I'm a writer, and I'm just gonna give you like what comes from my heart, right? Because I do activism. I'm not the person who does the work that organizes a protest, right? I am a participant in activism, and this is the best way that I can describe my feelings for defunding the police. I say fuck the police, so like I'm all for defunding the police. How we get there, I'm not sure yet, right? But this is like, I can only give you to the terms that I'm an expert in, right? In comedy, the way that you make fun of something is to fully understand it. Like old school Chris Rock, Richard Pryor, they read the books, you know what I'm saying? You can't make fun of something until you fully understand it. And we've all seen people try to do that, and you'll be like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, right? So for me, I know the idea that I want, but I am also doing the work. I say defund the police. I know that it's not working right now. I do not know what it looks like after this, because we've never had it before. And I think that is something that people try to trap you into when they'll be like, well, what does it look like? You don't know either. Like, that's the thing. We ain't never seen it. So like, I did a podcast, a friend of mine, and he was like, what does heaven look like to you? He like, my friend Dave had like a wild experience. He like went into a coma and legit died, yo. And then he was he came back. He's chill now.
Okay.
He came back. He died and came back, right?
Oh,
so he like was in a coma, went to the other side and came back, right? And he did the show, and he was like, I want to know what your version of the other side's like, and we're going to compare notes. And my version of the other side, I don't know. We've been taught, I grew up Southern Baptist. I was taught that it's like streets paved in gold, and we spend all day praising the Jesus that looked like Jonathan Van Ness. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is what I grew up with. But what I want to be truly free is something that I have never fully imagined, because everything that I've seen, I do not like. Everything that I know is anti-Black, and everything that I've been a part of is completely and wildly unacceptable, right? So for me to give you a fully thorough explanation for what I want, I don't know it yet, but I am researching it, and I know that what we currently have is bad. And I think that people are having a hard time accepting that the true fact is that what we have now is bad. I don't know what's next. We're doing the work to find out, but I think the foundation of this is everyone understanding and accepting and agreeing that what we have is bad. We haven't even gotten there yet, right?
Yeah,
so I think that
almost there.
Almost, but so many people have not accepted that like where we are isn't fully functional. So I do want to defund it, but like every day, like I'm a queer Black cis woman, right? Every day I'm reading on how to be a better trans ally. I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida. I'm unlearning what I knew, and then I need to relearn new stuff to be informed. I don't even know everything that I need to know yet. You know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So I think for the defunding the police, I'm all for it, because the system right now is very anti-Black, very anti-poor people, very anti anyone who is marginalized. That system is set up to hurt, and I'm anti that system. And I'm going to continue to do research and let the people who like went to school to do it. And then I'll go write a TV show, and if I get $100,000, I'll give them my fucking money. Everybody does their part. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm funny, and then sometimes people pay me to do comedy, and then I'm gonna take a third of that and give it to Jennifer. But that's what I'm saying. Like, everyone has a role, and I think people get caught up in like, If you can't go to the march, well, write a letter. And if you can't organize a march, then like, if you making ducats, then give it to the people who are doing the work. Cause I don't know how to do the work. I didn't go to school for that. And also like, I know that's not my calling,
Right.
but the calling that I am called to do, I'm very good at it. It pays me efficiently, and I would take all that money and give it to people who know what the fuck they're doing so that we can defund the police.
Yeah. And Kyle, I want to come to you because someone I feel like who is doing the work, like you're working in the political sphere, and it's interesting to see you nodding your head at some of these ideas that are, you know, when we talk about reparations or defund the police, or, you know, sometimes too, you hear people saying, you know, let's go into, you know, socialism, but going back to what Jen was talking about, my fear of that is if you don't fix what's at the core of it, you can still end up with the same thing, right? So it's still needing to do the work at the core so we don't end up in the same spot. So what are some of your ideas of, like, you know, you're on the ground, you're in the political sphere, what's possible, or what are your ideas?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think, you know, again, I'm not in my head. I'm like snapping at like all this shit because I mean, it's a process, right? And I think to the point that everybody's made so far is like, we're all going through it individually. We're all going through our own personal process, taking in everything that we're seeing, and all of our life experiences that we've had thus far. We're seeing, you know, seeing people open up and being more willing to agree that like what we currently have is a problem, is problematic, is maybe fair for some, not for others, you know, is you know, like gives better opportunities to some and not to others. And so, yeah, I think more and more people's minds are being open to say, okay, yeah, something's fucked up here. But then, right, where we are right now is in this kind of brainstorming limbo gray area where people are like, okay, I agree with you. This current system is not right, but how do we then change? How do we do something different? And like I was saying earlier, you have some people who are with you and like, yeah, I don't want Black people suffering, so here's a couple dollars, or here's a you know, a piece of legislation here or there. But then you have other people who are like, that's not enough. And then you have some people who are like, well, then what is it? What do you want? Or what should it look like? And it's like, well, hold up, I'm still trying to figure it out. And, you know, to Shantira's point, like, right, there's, you know, everybody has a role to play. And, you know, sometimes I find myself thinking like, you know, as you bring up like socialism, you know, in terms of like politics, there are people who now are like, you know, I consider myself a democratic socialist, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. And I think sometimes we get too much into the labels. And I think that's, and I get it, right? Like that helps people. It makes you feel more comfortable. It makes you feel like I'm a part of a collective who feels as if they have the solutions. And ultimately that's what we want, right? Like this degree of discomfort that we're in, while healthy, is still not comfortable, right? Like, you know, we're still, you know, threatened by police, by just random vigilantes that think they are police, you know, when we step outside. So we do absolutely want to get from this gray area, you know, to an area of comfort as soon as possible. But to everybody's point, like, we have to do the work. You know, and I think that, again, like we have to be mindful of rushing to quick solutions and saying, well, we just need socialism, or we just need this type of capitalism, or this type of whatever. Like, yo, we are in a time where we can really, you know, to Travel's point, like brainstorm, where we can really be creative and imaginative, and you know what, and maybe there are systems out there that exist, right? Like sometimes I think about the fact that like we come from a people who were ripped from our land and brought somewhere else, like, and you know, I don't even know the full history, but like, bro, we could have been just fine over there. You know, with like systems of society that worked perfectly fine for us, right?
Wakanda like, comes to mind for everybody.
You know,
I know everybody just went to Wakanda.
Right, exactly. Like we have vibranium, like we were good, you know? But like, who knows, right? Like, who knows what type of society or systems that we had in place? And I'm not saying that there aren't people doing that type of research and work, and you know, and again, I think we're all in this space where we're trying to learn more. But like, maybe there was a system that y'all ripped us away from that like we need to go back to and dig and pull it up and be like, oh, actually, yeah, we can do this shit here. But again, like, there may not be an answer, you know, like there may not be a wheel that already exists that we can just pull out. We may have to, and again, we're in a modern society now. We're living in a much more diverse society. So it's very likely that we do need to recreate the wheel. But like we have to do that work. To the point, just really quickly about like defunding the police. I think a good way of kind of understanding, this conversation, because it is a conversation, and I think, you want to be as organized as possible when you're thinking through something that's messy and chaotic. When George Floyd was killed, and again, we've had so many instances of this and where we've gone through this process, but in these last several months, when everybody's kind of rethinking, how do we do things, and more people are coming to that conversation, people were saying defund the police, people were saying disband the police. There's a lot of conversations about abolition, right? And again, these are things that like I myself am still in the beginning stages of like better understanding and being able to feel that I can tangibly hold. I'm definitely not saying like no to anything. I'm like, I'm trying to make sure that I don't allow any of my biases to slip in and be like, oh, we can't do that. Especially working in politics, you're often thinking about not just the ideal world, but what is realistic given the conditions that you have, right? Like, well, this person's in office, how far can I push them? And then you moderate yourself. So I'm doing the work to not like preemptively moderate myself and say, okay, you got a good idea. Other people think it's radical. I don't care what they think. Tell me about it. Let me hear what it is, right? But like defund, honestly, we know what defund is. Like governments have been pulling money out of education for years, have been pulling money out of, social programs for years, healthcare for years. Like, so I mean, we know what defund means. If you get $100,000, I'm gonna cut your shit to 50,000, right? Like we know what that means. So to me, like that's honestly the easiest step. It's saying these are the programs and the systems we have in place. We are going to reallocate some of the funds that are currently, disproportionately going to these types of things, and we're going to start spreading them around, to these types of things. Then I think we can start to have a conversation and kind of move into like, okay, well, after defund, what about disband, right? Like, what does it look like to live in a world where there are no police, at least as we understand them, right? Like, are we going to need people to respond to emergency situations of different types? Of course. But what does that look like? And how do we make sure that we have a populace that is skilled enough in the specific instance to be able to handle it? If it's a mental health issue, if it's a domestic violence issue, if it's a health issue, what have you, right? Like, how do we ensure that we have citizenry that can respond to the types of things that us living in community together need in cases of emergencies? And then abolition, like I said, I'm still in the beginning set. Like, I don't even know. Y'all lucky I know how to spell it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know what it meant back in slavery days, but I don't know what that looks like in 2020, right? So the work has to start. It has to be done. But I think that, like I said, when it comes to defunding, if you got $100, I'm gonna take 50 of it, and I'm gonna give it to somebody else who needs it.
So yeah, and it's sort of like what you're saying, BJ. I'm going to come to you, but there's examples of defunding these different organizations and things, so we know it's possible in the same way. And it's like, let's have these conversations, right? As opposed to just saying, no, wait, hold on, let's go back to the brainstorming. Even when you talked, a year ago when I was talking about reparations, people would look at me like I was like, crazy. But now, it was on the debate stage for the Democratic Party. And so now those conversations are happening. And let's look at what does that look like? It can come in different ways. Isn't that the point of society, for us to come together and continue having conversations, reimagining what is possible? Because I think the pandemic has shown us one thing, is that like the system, it's hollow, right? Like we spend all this money on, we have the best army and military and pouring billions of dollars into planes that don't work and just keep getting funded, where it's like the money is there, or having, billionaires pay taxes. Like there are ways for it to happen, as opposed to just saying sort of no. know. So BJ, on that idea of like kind of, kicking over ideas and what is possible, and also you're in the tech sphere, is there a way that like, listen, social media any tool is a tool that can be used for good or evil, right? And some of this, what we're saying, like what's different now, the killing of Black folks is nothing new. Lynchings are nothing new, but what is new, everyone got a little hand computer or a little, camera device to be able to capture this. So is there a way that we can continue using technology to drive some of these conversations, or maybe you have an idea outside of technology? And also maybe what are the things that we need to watch out for, and how technology can also be the detriment to the movement and getting progress done?
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is something that I've discussed at length with lots of people, especially when I have colleagues from different backgrounds that are in the tech space that really have very interesting ideas of, for example, their relationship with the police. Like, defund the police is such an alarming thing to them because the relationship with the police is nothing like our relationship. Like, they see me as a Black professional and they're like, oh yeah, and they're like, yeah, well, I've had like 7 or 8 run-ins with the cops and only one of them was ever positive. And each one of them I was afraid for my life, right? And this is a person where maybe I've seen the cops once, and that was because my cousin was doing donuts in an abandoned parking lot. And you're just like, okay, well, I'm gonna tell your dad, and I mean, that's the kind of relationship these people have. But to get to the technology point, which is a very good one, I think it's been extremely unfortunate where the power of social media or the internet at large to communicate has resulted in us in echo chambers and bubbles, and really have lost this art of just debating ideas or confronting bad ideas and having them die in a space of debate. And I think that's something that it's I think where it comes down to, where it comes to like a tech business point of view, is really incentives. Andrew Yang talked about this a little bit. He touched on this a lot, but it comes back to incentive. What is the incentive for these companies? The incentive right now for a lot of these companies is like, I want these people to spend as much time on my app as possible. I want this teenage girl to be on this app as much as possible, right? With no respect to that teenage girl's mental health, with no respect to that, what it's actually doing for her or to her. Like, technology has gone just running rampant on the incentive of how can we make this as valuable as possible. And it has gone unchecked. In fact, it's gone unchecked since 1997, where for some reason the government disbanded and removed their oversight, the technology oversight committee. So when a tech person like Zuckerberg goes to the Congress and they have 2 or 3 weeks to prepare questions, they're asking about, they don't even know the difference between an iPhone and an Android. And it's embarrassing.
They're like, can you fix my iPad?
My phone market? And it's like
an Android.
I'm like, and you had an entire staff. That new Mark Zuckerberg was coming a month ago, and that's the question that you came up with. And and this has been like, this is 20, 30 years of the government just not being involved in technology going unchecked. And the incentives have been, how can we make this as profitable as possible when it comes to the data that's being taken and used for whatever purposes, with or without your knowledge, when it comes to the psychological effect on especially teenage girls, but on just young people in general. Like, I can't imagine being an 8th grader right now, and like, I was bullied in junior high, and I was able to come home and have some cornbread and some greens and have a safe space. And like, now these kids, like, Facebook or Insta, whatever it is, like, that bullying can just continue 24/7. And like, I'm so concerned about like the mental well-being of some of the young people given the state of social media right now. And I think, part of it is, aligning or changing the incentives. Like, the incentives needs to be for a different end. It can't be just for financial gain, like, and whether that is government regulation that's coming in, again, people actually coming and understanding the issue, as Shantira mentioned, I mean, that's just so important. And people that are in government that actually can understand and then, like, you know, twist the right buttons and dials to change the incentive. So it's not going to be a situation where, well, what can we get away with that's going to be more profitable than whatever, you know, fee the SEC or whatever other governmental body is going to fine us with, right? So that's, you know, that's one key portion that is really important. But I think also, I mean, there just, again, needs to be some creativity about, like, how do you incentivize people to be more curious in their use of technology? Like, you know, how do you present that information and prevent some of the kind of information spreading that happens? Like the term viral is really not accidental. I mean, it is very, the ideas that float around the internet function a lot like bacteria and viruses do, where you have an emotionally charged thing that is out there and it gets you so incensed that your critical thinking is just abandoned. Like, it's just emotional drive. So you have this headline pimping going on. People are just spreading the headlines. Doesn't matter when the article was written 4 years ago. Doesn't matter if the headline has nothing to do with the content of the article. It's just, here's an emotionally charged headline. Ooh, that sounds true. Retweet. And I mean, and that's what happens. And you have these sides where, and it's just like, what is going to happen in the future to basically incentivize people to have debate rather than echo chambers? And again, this is a totally, I mean, there's definitely some discussion about this, but there's not really I think great ideas about, well, what is the solution? Like, how do we move there? I mean, there's some things that Twitter is starting to do, for example, with saying, like, hey, you know, if you try to retweet an article, like, did you read the article? Like, just having that. And The Guardian has start putting, like, big yellow banners on the top once an article is a certain age. Like, this article was written in 2014. This person's opinion might have changed since then. Like, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's helpful, but I mean, those things have not been built in. Like, you know, even right now, if I see a post from some dude speculating in his basement and a PhD, like, those things look the same, have the same font, have the same size, have the same presentation, and there's no credibility that's different. Like, if those two people get on the stage and homeboy with Cheeto dust and a tank top is trying to argue a point versus, like, you know, it's like, oh, okay, well, that dude doesn't even look credible from the jump. Like, and the way he's delivering his points is, like, ridiculous. But you write these things down and present them side by side, and then you have climate change deniers getting as much of a megaphone as climate change, even though it's a 95 to 5%. It's like, it's problems. Yeah.
Well, and I see our neighborhood friendly librarian is just, like, blowing up over here because you're mentioning the lack of people's research on things.
I have to, BJ, thank you. This is my territory. This is what librarians have been screaming about since the dawn of time. When people came to me at parties telling me Google's taking your job, I had to be like, no, sir, it's not. It's lifting up my job. What you're describing right now is source evaluation. This is what I teach students on a day in and day out basis, and I'm noticing it crumble in real time. People are only reading headlines. People aren't reading the content. People aren't researching the people who are creating the content. These are things that will help us deepen that information and get us further into knowledge. But the fact of the matter is, they're doing this because they just want yes men. They want somebody to be like, ooh, that's comfortable, that feels good, that's not challenging me. I'm going to just sit in this warm bath of everybody just agreeing with my inner thoughts, which could be racist, which could be just the bigotry in inner thoughts that they're just resting in, instead of being challenged and diving deeper into why I feel challenged by that information. I do want to point out one caveat, though, is that we need to break away from the gatekeepers. A lot of times we'll see a PhD and we'll be like, oh yeah, I trust that PhD. But that doesn't mean anything if that person is a bigot. And I'm saying bigot because it covers everything, you know?
Yeah.
And I think what we really need to do, and what's going to break that, unfortunately, that trend, is distrust. We need to get everybody to be a little bit more paranoid with their information that they're ingesting. That's what I tell my students. I walk into a classroom, I go, you need to be more paranoid. You can't trust that. You got to go, why am I reading this? Why is that person writing about this? Is this going to educate me? Are they trying to sway my opinion? Are they trying to inform me about something that's going on? Are they trying to sell me something? Because those are the 4 key basics that all information falls underneath. There's no ifs, ands, or buts to it. For example, this content that we're creating right now, the intent is to inform.
Yeah.
Inform and educate. All of our motives right now, unless, you know, James is trying to sell a t-shirt on the side or something like that. I don't know. I'm here for the hustle.
My shirt, Black Lives Matter, made by Stephen LeMay.
I'm here for the hustle, but you know, you got to understand that.
You got to make that money and have my reparations.
And I'm not saying any of that stuff is negative, because there could be negativity in any of those pockets. It's just understanding that content and knowing what to do with it. Fake news is hyperbolic at this point. We cannot use that phrase anymore because people just use it to discredit. What we need to look at is the phrase of misinformation. Is it trying to distract me?
Yeah,
I had to get that out, or
a lot of it is being, you know, for distraction purposes by Agent Orange. It's a lot of just, you know, it kind of goes back to what BJ is saying too, is, you know, a lot of these things, the viral component of tech is meant to trigger this reaction. So we go off over here. So it's kind of like what Aneke was saying, take a pause, you know, sort of suss this out. And kind of tying into what, you know, BJ was saying, I think in the tech sphere, there needs to be more Black people in there. There needs to be more trans people in there. There needs to be more, you know, folks of different backgrounds. Everyone benefits from diversity. So because tech is leading the charge on things, so people can be in the space and say, hey, like, yeah, there's a lot of weird things going on with like Juneteenth, like for Snapchat, like break the chains. Like there needs to be Black people in the room so we could, you know, say we're not having that conversation. That's not going to happen there, you know? And then that goes back to a step further of like being able to reimagine what society looks like so there can be people to even move into those spheres, right? So if there is like universal basis income, defunding the police, which is like funneling into more resources, you know, for health, for, you know, drug abuse, for education, like can we protect the young minds of those people so that way they can have, you know, a seat at the table, you know? And so I just have a last question or two that we're just going to throw around to the room. I want to throw out. There's something that we haven't really talked about. It was kind of mentioned. So as we're now moving forward, what sort of like specific action things are you looking for in allies and people within the community? Like what are like next steps allies is what I need you to do, or people and Black folks as well, like here's what we're gonna do as well, because there's, you know, 2 different components, or maybe they're on the same page. So I'm just gonna throw it out there, and who got an answer? Jen, we'll come to you
Jennifer.
first. Okay, yeah.
Just have a quick, because it's kind of like a non-answer, but it's not a non-answer, but
yeah,
it's more general. So I feel like people probably have more specific solutions, but Shantir really said it, was to know your role. I think that's so important because we all have strengths and we all have avenues that we've studied. And so if just how I'm looking at all of us, you know, on screen, we all bring something. And so if we can really deepen into that and use that for solutions, then we'll be better off. So I can't say we all need to do one thing. It's being okay. If your place isn't on the front line, just be okay with that and don't take yourself out. Cause, you know, I was in bed all June, like feeling stressed out and tired and woe out, you know, and depressed and sad. And so it's like, okay, I'm not helping the movement this way. So what looks different? But I know a lot of people were just spinning out, blaming themselves. And so therefore not doing anything. So knowing your role and deepening into that. And I love the word incentive that Bruce was bringing up, you know, because sometimes I feel burdened. I don't know if you all feel this way, where it's like, why does it have to be me though? Or like, why again? I'm so tired and I got bills to pay, you know? So it's like, God, but the thing is, it's like, we are the ones we've been waiting for, and we're incentivized. Like we care to make money to spread the wealth. We care about healthcare. We do care about, you know, trans lives matter. Like, if not everybody thinks that, yet there are people who it's their mission to bring people on board. I've gotten tired of that. So yay for you. But we are the ones who are incentivized just for the greater good of our people to raise each other up. So if we can be successful, if we can be well rested, hydrated, and moisturized, you know, and just doing our thing, then this is what we're gonna do with what we have. Like Shantira said, she's gonna break me off something when she's successful. But that's truly who we are. That's truly what we do. We pour into our community. So that's what I think we should do is be well. Because when you're well and you're doing good, we tend to give back. That's not what the media will tell you about us. They say we're at each other's throat and that we don't reach a hand back. But all of you that I'm looking at, that's not been the experience that I've had of you people, us. So that's what we can do.
Yeah.
I'll add, I think, you know, two things. I recently heard someone say, I think it might have been on my podcast, unsure, but they said you got to kill the Karen in your head. And, you know, the ways in which, you know, we can be complicit in some of these systems and like not even think about it. Short story, I have a friend, him and his partner were shopping a couple weeks ago. My friend's black, his partner is Japanese. They were shopping and my friend like left a bag at the store, and by the time they came back the bag was gone, right? And they called their bank to try to see if they could get the money back because it was like a couple $100s, and the bank was like, the only way we can get you your money back is if you file a police report. And then my friend and his partner had to have a conversation because they want their money back, but they also, one of them didn't want to call the police, didn't want to engage with the carceral state, right, in that particular way. And I think like those are the ways that we have to like interrogate our own thoughts, because in reality, you shouldn't have left the bag in the store, but now you about to engage the police because you want your $200 back. When in reality, you should just take the L that you left your stuff in the store and somebody got a blessing of negligence, right? And so kill the Karen in your head. The second thing I'll say is I think that, you know, this was on our podcast last week, we did an episode about allyship, and our guest was Jared Lucas, who is the executive director of the Stonewall Community Foundation. And he challenged our conception in terms of like the language we use in terms of ally. And he talked about how the ways in which, you know, oftentimes the burden and the onus of the work is like put on the marginalized person and on the marginalized community, when in reality, it's the folks who benefit the most from these systems, right, that need to be taking the more active role in dismantling them. And so one of the things that he talked about was like, he felt as if like in this particular moment, ally can be very passive. It can be very soft. And he was like, in reality, he's like, I need race traders. I need white people who are willing to sabotage, to be saboteurs of whiteness, right? Who are willing to put themselves in their bodies and take some sort of sacrifice, right, in the work of dismantling all of these systems. Because in reality, right, we as Black folks are often in danger. We're often putting ourselves in danger, both physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, etc., when it comes to doing this work. And a lot of people who are supposed to be supporters in this movement, right, they're taking more passive roles, right? And I find it so interesting the ways in which, you know, never mind. I was going to use an example, but I don't like that example because it's not a perfect example. So I'm not going to use it no more. But like the way we just need more people to like make the sacrifices that we are also making in this work. And then we as Black folks, we as brown folks, we as queer and trans folks also need to, I think, to Jennifer's point, you know, take care of ourselves as we do this work. It's okay to step back. It's okay to say no. No is a complete sentence, right? You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to show up and be part of every single conversation. Somebody else can do it. It's all right. And so those are things that I would add as I think, you know, things that individuals can do moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. And I like turning the word, we need ally to mean what we think of when we think of abolitionists, right? They were in the trenches. It couldn't just be black people just freeing ourselves. We didn't have the keys to the chains to do the unlocking there, right? So it's like ally is a verb. It's an action word that requires action. Yeah. Aneke, for yourself, what are you looking for allies to do or moving forward? What would you like to see happen? Yeah.
I love that. I mean, everything that's been said, like, I 100% sign on to. I want to exhibit allyship in my own way too, as how I would want it presented to me, you know? There are action ways, like for example, I'm a cis straight woman, right? So by putting my pronouns as a signature at the end of all my work emails is a active way that I can stand with the trans community, you know? By, if someone says something homophobic in my family, by not just letting it slide, by calling even a dear person or friend group, someone that I'm close to, by not just letting it slide, that is an active way. And I want that in allyship as well. I want it to be infused in daily life. I want someone who is, oh, okay, great. Now you're posting hashtag Black Lives Matter on your Insta feed, right? But I know I'm your only Black friend. So are you actually doing the work when you're out there at work? You know, are you actually calling people out? Are you actually not talking to that one person who's close to you that is racist? You know, I love the actions, and it's a tricky place to be at, especially right now, because it's so performative. And I want to say, great, good, thank you, great, thanks. You've entered the room, you've entered the chat. Okay. But you can listen and stop wearing it like a mink coat, you know? Actually just, it's your underpants. That's what it is, you know? And I think that's where my frustration comes from. And that's why I have to remind myself that I too am an ally too. Because I think there's a lot of times that I need to walk the walk if I want it to be exhibited to myself, because we all have privileges in some sort of way.
Yep.
You know?
Totally.
Even, you know, intersectional, but still, you know? So I guess that's kind of my way adding on without repeating the amazing things that were already said.
Well, I like it, sort of like, you know, be the change that you want to see in the world. And also it reminds me of what Jen was talking about. It's sort of, you know, we lost, you know, John Lewis. We're losing the civil rights leaders. And if you think about it, if Martin Luther King Jr. had been alive today, it would have been time for the next generation to step up. And so I think I look at this space, we are it. And going back to what Jen said and Shantira said, that we each have our avenue and it'll look different for each of us, you know?
Can I jump in? Because you bring in a really good point, James. I think right now we're at a baton handing off, you know? And I think a lot of the issue that's coming with this okay boomer, okay zoomer narrative that's going on is a discrediting of these two meetings of generations. We are not where we are unless those of us who came before us built those foundations, right?
Yep.
But those who came before us cannot pass that baton without the trust of letting these new generations take it. So I think that's another form of allyship. Is
generational allyship.
Exactly, is understanding that there is work done not in a vacuum. It's work in, I hate the word collaboration. Tandem's better. Yeah, because I just feel like I've been in enough work meetings where they're like, collaborate. So it's nice to have a different word. But yeah, tandem. Get on that tandem bike, pedal together, damn it.
I love that. Put it on a t-shirt. All right, Kyle, what are you looking for in allyships or Black folks moving together? What's your advice to them? What do they need to do for you?
Yeah, first I just want to say that like I'm loving all of Aneke's like analogies. Like I love the whole like the bike riding in tandem. I love it. And she just threw that in at the end. But even the like the underwear versus the mink coat, like, oh, I'm definitely gonna steal
Thank you.
I will
yes.
As I can remember to give in the moment, but like I think that was perfect, right? Like, because I think we are just really quickly to her point, like we're in a space where, and James, you asked us some stuff before we started this panel to kind of get a foundation. And, I think that like social media is a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways, right? Like obviously, as many people have already talked about on the panel, we're at the moment where we're able to have the conversations that we're having. We're able to see the diversity in the streets, that we're seeing because we're able to share information much more quickly, and a lot of it. And we're able to consume a lot of information, much more quickly. But then it also gives people the ability to grab that mink coat, throw it on, and be like, oh, I'm out here, like, Black Lives Matter or whatever. And then they go inside and they can be like, all right, just drape it and throw it. I'm thinking of Devil Wears Prada, where she comes in and just like throws her coat and someone catches it and, whatever. But it's like, nah, like I need you to be in that underwear all day. Like I need you to it's hot outside. I need you to be sweating down there. I need you to sit in it. So I'm gonna take it. But it's really good. And that's what we need people to do. And perfect transition, because this gets exactly to my answer to your question. What I need to see, and this is from allies, and everybody, like Black people, white people, everybody who is committing themselves to doing this work and being anti-racist, is I need us to acknowledge and be comfortable sitting in the discomfort. I think that, again, we're at a point where we don't know all the answers yet. I can tell you that this is fucked up, but I can't yet necessarily tell you what we need to replace things with. Where we are is not the right place, but I can't necessarily yet articulate to you where we need to be, like literally, right? We can start talking about what some of the work is to get us there. But many of us are having conversations about what that ultimate destination looks like. And so it's going to be uncomfortable. And it's going to be, there's going to be varying levels of discomfort, right? There's going to be discomfort that we feel individually. There's going to be, discomfort that we feel interpersonally, right? Like in our respective relationships. And there's going to be discomfort on a societal level. But like, I need us to commit to being okay with that, right? And I need us to have leaders that can be honest with us and say, this shit's going to hurt for a little bit. This is going to be just, this is going to not be comfortable for a little bit. This is going to be a little, strange for a little bit. We're going to ask people to step outside of themselves. We're going to ask white men who normally run everything to sit down and shut up, and you may really want to say something and you may really think you're going to be helpful, but you probably aren't going to be right now, and not until you do a little more work. And there's value. And I say this all the time, there is so much value in silence. There's so much value, sometimes in just being quiet and listening. There's so much value in allowing other people the space to speak. Sometimes that in and of itself does so much, right? Like you may think you have the answers. It's like being a math teacher, right? Like obviously the math teacher can tell every student 2 + 2 = 4, but like, what is the value in that, right? Like you have to sometimes, and you could have the like dunce in your class, right? Like, I'm gonna ask little Timmy what 2 + 2 is, and I know he's gonna be like 7. But you know what? Little Timmy needs to have the opportunity to raise his hand and give his wrong answer, and he needs to experience what it's like to be loud and wrong, and to be corrected, and to be guided on how to find the right answer, right? Like, and all of us need that. And I think that we need to step into that discomfort. Like I said, whether you are somebody in the movement, whether you are somebody who is Black, whether you are somebody new to the movement, whether you are somebody sitting, by your window, literally as I am right now, watching, a march go by, and you're like, oh, I'm not out there. But it's like, well, why not, right? Like, why don't you at least go downstairs and stand on your stoop and watch it, and wave to people, or read the signs that they're carrying as they're going by, right? Like, it may not be comfortable initially, but like, I think we need to be okay with stepping into that discomfort. We need leaders that are going to be honest with us and say, I need you to step into this discomfort. We need to step into this discomfort as we figure this out. And so that's what I want to see.
Totally. Love it. And Shantae, I'm going to come to you, but you reminded me, Kyle, of just like, you look at those pictures. I was looking at a picture of like the sit-ins, and there's these white people, yelling at these Black people. And it's like, who do you want to be in that photo, right? That's someone's grandparents who are still alive today. So even just from like an egotistical social media point, where do you want to be? And we're looking back at like the pictures of history, but also like, you know, do the fucking right thing, right?
Right. Well, and also just really quick, like in those photos too. I mean, you look at some of them, and right there's the you know, people in the sit-ins at the counter, you know, black people getting yelled at and white people who are yelling. But then you look in the background of those photos, there's a couple sitting at the table enjoying their lunch. You know, just okay. You know, there's someone over there like, all right, I wish they'd hurry up so I can order my food, right? Like, you don't want to be those people either. You know what I mean? Like, and that gets back to the conversation about people just being cool with the peace, right? Like, someone was in there in that restaurant being like, I wish everyone would just shut up. Like, I just want to order my BLT and go about my business. No, like, you don't want to be that person either.
Right.
Yeah.
Actively wanting justice, right?
Yeah.
So Shantira, for you, what are your calls to action, your requests, your needs from allies and Black folks alike?
I think that, do I have anything left? Everyone said so many things. I think jumping off of what Jennifer was saying, I want Black people to take care of themselves. I think that every Black person I know is very tired, and not in the sense that like tired of doing the work, but like our bodies are dangerous and it's exhausting to exist. I don't think people understand how hard it is to be a person who, when you take a walk, it is dangerous. When you go to a restaurant, it is dangerous. To be in this body is dangerous. So I want Black people to feel seen and to know that I know that the body you do the work in is carrying the stress of existing. And I think that that is a thing that, to take care of it, you know, self-care is not selfish. So I think that that is something I would love for all Black people to know, is that like your existence is defiant. And if you can't march, you breathing is an act of protest, right? And then if you got it in you to do a little extra work, well, that's what's up. You know, that's what's up. I mean, like for me, I can only say what like, I like social media. I think it's like fun. Most of my social media before the pandemic was like dogs and babies and eating ice cream. Like it was pretty chill. And then like now I do this thing where like I bake bread. Like that's what I've been doing. And like I post pictures of my bread. And then I have a decent media following, like not like 100 million people, but like in every post that I do, I put a call to action, something that I really like. So like, I know that people will watch me make like a Japanese milk bun, but after they read the information about it, I'll be like, cool, now this is a link to all the bail funds, right? And like, as a comedian, I've spent a long time like putting the pill in the cheese, like that you would give to like a dog. And like people come to comedy shows being like, I'm gonna laugh, but I definitely don't want to learn how to be better with Black people. And I'm like, I know you're gonna read everything I did to make this fucking bread. When you get to the bottom of it, you better email somebody about Breonna Taylor. So I think that like, I am just doing what I know, sounds weird, what I know gets me attention. I am doing what I know gets me attention, and the attention that comes to me, I am trying to give it a trajectory into something that I feel is beneficial and that I believe in, that I research, right? Everybody has their role. I'm like, I am not rich, but like everybody I know is getting their government $600, RIP, hopefully it comes back, and taking $200 because that money's not real and giving it away. Everybody that I know who has the least is doing the most with what they have, right? So I would say that is fine. Like if you can walk outside and give somebody a water bottle, because we got 1 million of them for free every time we go to like something in the before times, give away those water bottles, you know? I think that there is nothing too small. And I think that that is what I would call for action. Call to action is to, whatever you have is valuable. And like your existence is valuable. And if you go down, like Kyle was saying, if you go downstairs and your Black body is downstairs saying, I support that, that is a call to action. That is an act of protest. So I think for me, for people to understand that, like, I mean, I've been to the marches, right? But like, if you can't, your existence it not only does it matter, but your existence is an act of protest, and anything that you decide to do, no matter how small. Also, if it's not on social media, if you write one letter, if you do one tweet and some asshole from high school sees it, that is an effective way to be a part of this movement. And we need you. And I think that that is a thing. People think that you have to be in the front of the march. Marching is important, but I want you to know that, like, if you write a letter or if you tweet something and it sees the right person, or if you post a photo and in your bio, take out Shantira.com, take out your IMDb page, take that out, and then every week change it to a bail fund. You are doing work. So I think those are my things.
I love it. Yeah. And like we've been saying that and any part of any movement, it was never one thing that did it. It was literally attacking a virus. There's a pandemic of racism that's been affecting this world for centuries. And so we have to attack it from every angle, whatever your avenue is. All right, Bruce, closing us out here. What for yourself is your request from allies or Black folks, or your what's next?
Oh, for sure. First, just want to say how inspired I am by everyone's advice, and this is both for allies and then to yourself be an ally too. It's just wonderful. I think my advice specific is probably going to be for Black professionals in workplaces. I think we've mentioned before how there are these kind of token expressions, the mink coat analogy. Oh, it is it's just so hot. But yeah, it's like, you know, hey, we have our image in black with white lettering talking about how much our company cares about Black people. We've changed Aunt Jemima to be something else, whatever it is. It's like, great, that's wonderful. But like, you know, within my own workplace and, you know, and some workplaces are like this, but I've been able to have conversations about, okay, well, I'm more concerned about the day-to-day operations of my workplace and how that is facilitating equality of opportunity for all types of people. And some of it is going to be about, like, if you have any influence at all on the hiring practices, the recruiting practices, any influence at all about where resources go within your company, you know, who's going to get the resources to tell their story within, you know, whatever media. You know, and that's been something that's been important for me to communicate, and also to have like my managers at work to not just support, but show up. Like if we're having our Black event at work, like please come and encourage them to do that. So I think those type of things, like, you know, and again, this is kind of the other things that have been said, like the self-care, getting yourself to a place where you can, you know, feel taken care of, energized, and have that kind of energy and courage to go out there and go that extra, to be like, hey, can I have some influence within my workplace? To maybe it's just as little as like, I'm going to have conversations and open myself up to a degree that I normally wouldn't, to make sure that this white engineer understands a little bit about the experience of a Black person in America. Like I've heard a white engineer, for example, say, well, why? I mean, I don't even vote for the president. I mean, does that actually affect my life at all? Right. And that was, I mean, an absolute, without a doubt, true statement for him. Like, and he's not an evil, malicious person. He's just a very, you know, kind of cold, logical person. Be like, well, does this affect my life? And if not, like, why should I care? And having conversations even with those colleagues to get them to, I mean, you're not going to have one conversation and change your point of view necessarily unless it's a really good conversation. You feeling, you know, had your Wheaties that morning. But if you can get them to question, even just to be like, let's present the question. Like, have you wondered why there is a ghetto and that all these Black people live in the same place? Do you think that's been an accident and that's been happening since the 1910s, since the 1800s, since whatever? Like, just presenting questions sometimes is a great and effective way to really challenge some of those existing kind of thoughts, I think. So So my Black nerds, Black professionals out there, I want to encourage you to when you can and you're feeling it, to try to question and try to encourage day-to-day, like everyday practices in the workplace that are going to be more inclusive.
Yeah, I love it. It's sort of like, planting seeds and continuing to water that garden. And it comes from all the different angles in the work that we do. Meet people where they are, but don't leave them there. That's been something that's been really following me. It's a lot of head nods. Cool. Well, I appreciate and I love each and every one of you so much for being here. Before we go, I do want to just give you all an opportunity to, how can we support you? How can we follow something that you're doing? Just give us a quick shout out of something that you're doing that we can, if it's a podcast, if it's a show, if it's something, and then plug a little bit of something, reach one, teach one, no, give one, I don't know. Just full circle. Give a shout out to something else that somebody else is doing. I lost it. It's the end of the thing. Give a little shout out to like somebody else's work that they're doing. If it's a book, if it's a show that someone can look at, maybe it's part of your self-care toolkit. We're going to work our way backwards from where we started. Bruce, I know you were just talking, but how can we support something that you're doing or follow you, or and then what's something that we should be looking at, some sort of media or book or something?
Yes, indeed. So I'm Cymatic Bruce, mostly active on Twitter. If you're interested in virtual reality things that are happening, you can follow me there and find out what's going on. Lots of interesting stuff. It's a new medium and new exciting frontier, but it also, as with all tech, but on the bleeding edges of tech, I mean, the voices are just limited. So I'd like folks to check that out and see what can be done. One of the things that I watched recently that was really cool is it was a Netflix kind of documentary on Black filmmakers. I think it was called They Gotta Have Us. They Gotta Have Us. There we go.
3-part series. It's amazing. Yeah. It's a tip of the iceberg of just Black history through cinema. So good.
Yeah, it was just wonderful. Like, I mean, I just enjoy. Like, I mean, there's just so many stories out there.
We're going quick, so awesome. Right, watch that, and I love it. Wonderful, Kyle. Real quick, what can we support in viewers, and then what should we be looking at and ingesting?
Nice. No, yeah. So, I mean, you can find me on socials at Kyle M. So that's KYLEIM. That's the Twitters and the Instagrams of the world. In addition to all the millions of other things that I do, I also co-host a podcast. It's called House Party. So you can go to housepartyny.com, and our socials are usually the same thing, House Party NY. We were called the best New York political podcast. So check it out. Whether you're in New York or not. We talk about federal stuff as well. To give a shout out, this is going to be really easy given where I'm sitting. I'm going to give a shout out to some friends who have written books. So you should read these. All right. I feel like I'm sure this is going to be flipped around, but whatever. Michael Arsenault is an author and a good friend of mine. I Don't Want to Die Poor is his second book. Check that out, and then check out his first. Also, Bossy Ikby, she's amazing. I'm Telling the Truth, But I'm Lying. Another book you should check out, another friend of mine. And then lastly, another friend of mine, Darnell Moore, No Ashes in the Fire. If anybody has not read this one yet, go ahead, check it out. It's an amazing book. This is something my mom got me. It's called Activist. It's kind of like a coffee table book. It has a whole listing of various activists, people out here in the community in the struggle that everybody should know about. I think you guys have seen this guy before. But yeah, check that out as well.
Who that? All right, thanks, Reading Rainbow. Okay, I'm here for that. Shantira, to you, same question.
Okay. On the socials, I'm Tira, Tira _Tira on Twitter and Instagram. You can, I have a podcast coming out with Busy Phillips called Busy Phillips is Doing Her Best. It's going to drop at the end of August, which will be really fun. To me and two white ladies. And a lot of times I just be like, y'all can't do that. And if you want to hear that, that's fun. And then things that I think you should follow. Here in LA, there's a Black Women Lead at Black_Women Lead. I think you should follow them on Instagram. We do a lot of really cool work. We just went to Crenshaw and gave out 3,000 meals in one day. They're doing the work. They are Black women led, and then they are supported by Black women, and they are walking the walk. So follow them. And I just watched Disclosure a couple of weeks ago, and it's if you want to be a better trans ally, which I think we all should be trying to be a better trans ally, I say this: I didn't know how much I needed to unlearn to be better. And I think that if you're open to being better, that movie will make you see that the things that you didn't even know you needed to unlearn. It was fantastic. It really helped me to really become a better trans ally.
Love it. All right, Jen.
You're taking notes.
I know. I was like, oh, Jen's like, oh, write down all the recommendations.
So jennifercovington.com is my website. Since my social media presence is iffy in the name of self-care, but that's my hub. And I have to shout out podcast Shine On Sister, since James helped me launch it, and it was in the name of Representation Matters, because I would rather hide, but it matters. And also doing a Soul Sister Business Building Summit right now. So jennifercovington.com/summit for anyone, women in business, women, if you, anyway, identified anyway as a woman, or anyone's welcome really, but we're going to be saying sister and queen. And if you would respond to that, come on. And then I have to shout out Ashe Lytle of In Her Power, because she's really who has taught me about just like folks in the trenches who are doing the work and how self-care matters, because people of color are dying of heart attacks and all these diseases because they're exhausting themselves versus for the cause. So that's what's really gotten me on like, oh, we have to pour into ourselves because we're not taught that. So that's where that was sourced from, Ashe Lytle of In Her Power. And then also Girl Track. I've gotten so fed from Girl Track. They just did a 21-day challenge, and every day they were like, move your body, get moving. And then also coupled it with a historical figure. So I also watched such a rejuvenating talk they did with Angela Davis and Nikki Giovanni. So they're just doing really, really cool stuff. So if you're trying to pour into yourself, they're just doing really beautiful work. So those are some 2 cool resources I have.
Love it. All right, Treval, how can we support you in the work that you're doing, and what should we be looking at?
So I'm on Twitter at Treval Anderson. And as you mentioned earlier, I co-host a podcast on the Maximum Fun Network called Fanti, Fanti. And the people that I want to shout out are Sasha Alexander and Devin Michael Lowe of Black Trans Media, which is the organization that works to empower and support Black trans folks. They're based out of the New York area, but they do a lot of work all over. And as so many folks are looking to support Black trans folks, I think they're an organization that deserves so much attention and support as well.
Awesome. All right, the first lady of Minority Korner, what you got?
That's me. I am off Twitter because that was need to get off it. Self-care. I haven't quit it, but I might return when we have a vaccine for COVID. Who knows? I am on Instagram. If you guys like looking at pictures of babies, hairstyles, and embroidery. That's what I do, and occasionally a hashtag on there, and I might start doing my research tips again. I'm feeling inspired about being an activist in that sort of way. So watch out for that. My Instagram is Nnekay, Nnekay, lowercase.
Wow,
lucky. A weird name, unusual. Who I would like to shout out, I'm gonna follow Kyle with Reading Rainbow with a book of my friend. Her name is Bethany Morrow. She does not need help because this book is flying like hotcakes, but it's called A Song Below Water. It is a YA book about Black mermaids, which is, I love it. I think it's awesome. The book is across the room, but the cover's gorgeous. Take my word for it. But it's A Song Below Water. Let's get into it. Black mermaids. I love it. And also, I want to encourage buying Black with our PPE, because one, we got to be supporting each other, and also stopping this virus in its tracks. And one of the most comfortable masks that I have ever bought in the most beautiful African patterns is from this woman who is Oakland based, and it's called Love Igué, which is love, and then Iguehi. So it's African fashions, but also those masks are bomb. I love it. They're beautiful. So many different shapes and sizes, and you can adjust it with the straps. Because, you know, the ones that go around the head, some of us with our hairdos, we can't do that, you know? It's about the ears. It's all about the ears. So that's me.
Man, wow. Well, once again, I just want to say a huge heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you. I love you each like so much, and the work that you are doing is just so incredibly important. You're such just wonderful voices. I've been just so incredibly moved throughout this whole entire thing, and I hope that you all who are watching as well, thank you for watching this and also supporting. This is why we did this, as a gift to you, because you support the work that we do, and we wanted to come here, and I hope that you are feeling empowered, enlightened, and the baton is now in our hands. Let's take that. There's so many examples of what to do next, and you can keep watching this as many times as you need to get that recharge and that education and that empowerment and that self-care. It's just everything. It's a whole lot of everything. So with that, thank you all so much for coming to the first ever Minority Korner Town Hall. We love you all so much, and remember, Minority Korner, because together we're the majority. I'll put on some like music or something, and we're like dancing.